So to our new leaders, thank you for joining us for our February new leadership presentation. I am really excited to have Anne with us. Anne wrote a beautiful bio, so I am going to start with a prayer and then I will turn this presentation over to her. So if we could just settle ourselves for a moment on this probably very busy Monday morning. I have a prayer that Sandy Flaherty, who is the missions person at Mercy High School Burlingame, wrote, and I would like to share it with you. Holy Spirit, we experience your presence among us. We are gifted in this community with the spirit of your love and its action in our lives. Enable us to bring the spirit of mercy to others. Help us live in the spirit of your goodness and love. May your peace be reflected in our words. May your love find a home in our hearts. May your mercy be the work of our lives. We ask this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, thank you for joining us. And I will turn this over to you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. And good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen with you here. Okay. Can everyone see that? I'm assuming that's good.
We can, yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, well, good morning. Today I was asked to speak to you all this morning, and it's my pleasure to do so on the function of human resources in an organization. I put a little bit up here about myself before we get started. So currently, I'm the Senior Director of Human Resources for the Sisters of Mercy of the Americas. I work in the Marion location. I started there in 2016 as the HR Director for the Mid-Atlantic community. And then during the journey of oneness, which we went through from, well, really from the time I started until 2021, I was the Regional Director of Human Resources, and I was assigned to a certain geographical area of the United States as my region to do HR services. And then once the journey of oneness was over, I was made the Senior Director of Human Resources, and I share my position, or there's another Senior Director. We're co-directors. She is in charge of compensation and payroll. And then basically the two of us are responsible for the entire HR function for the Sisters of Mercy organization for the United States and Guam. So my education, I have a bachelor's of arts degree in sociology from the University of Delaware. I actually started my career as a social worker. I worked in the field of social work for maybe 5 years until I switched over to HR. And I have about 25 years of sort of cumulative experience in the field of HR. I do have 2 HR certifications. One is through SHRM, and the other is through the HR Certification Institute, which is an SPHR. It just means Senior Professional in Human Resources. I'm active in 2 local HR associations, the Chester County HR Association and the Delaware County HR Association. And in 2019, I was actually nominated as HR Person of the Year for the Greater Valley Forge HR Association. So that's a little bit about me. I'm gonna move on to talk about our agenda. I thought what we would do today is just kind of review what is HR, what do we do. We're going to talk about the functional areas of HR and best practices. I was asked to talk a little bit about organizational culture, so I have a special focus on that. I have some HR resources that we can I can share with you. And then interestingly, at the end, we'll talk about some current HR trends. So what is the function of HR and what do we do in an organization? Basically, we partner with leaders in an organization to develop strategies that align the goals of the organization with the resources it needs to meet them, and the resources being people. And then we help create a structure to help get it there, and through the management of its employees. And we do this by performing lots of different responsibilities in the different areas of HR discipline that we're going to go over today. In our organization, we use what's called an HR generalist, but you could have in an organization HR specialists that perform just one area of HR, and that is what they specialize in. Like I said, in our organization, we use generalists, so they kind of perform all the functions of HR. They're not specialized. Sometimes in smaller organizations, if you don't have an HR department, you can achieve efficiencies and workforce management through other means, like outsourcing your HR function, or possibly joining something called a professional employer organization, which kind of takes over the HR function in your organization. I thought what I would start with to get everyone sort of engaged is to do a poll. Just want to kind of gauge from the group how often in your role you come across a situation or issue or problem that's HR related. And so Susan's put the poll up. If you guys could just answer never, rarely, occasionally, or frequently. Okay. Okay, we've got 11 out of 14 people answered. It looks like, most of you at some point have had to deal with an HR issue. So I'll share the results.
I think that the people who did not answer are my coworkers.
Okay.
Who are here with us, our colleagues.
Okay, that's fine. So thank you for taking the poll. I just wanted to see, what frequency you have to deal with HR issues in your organization. And then I thought if you could just take a minute in the chat to kind of share a situation, or just, it could be one word or a sentence, that what kinds of things you use HR for, or where you've had to go to HR for guidance. If you could just maybe share in the chat. Does everyone know how to use the chat? Okay, terminating a contract. Anybody else want to share? Termination. Payroll. Termination, contract, maternity leave. Okay. Retirement. Hostile work environment. Performance issues. Okay. That's good. I think we're employee engagement. I think we'll touch on most of these topics today. And obviously, if you have any questions, I don't know if there's a raise your hand feature on here or not, but I'll stop periodically and see if anybody has questions or comments. So let's kind of dive right into it then. These are the functional areas of HR, and these are the things that we're going to go over today. The first one is job analysis and job design. The second would be recruitment and selection, and then training and development, performance management, compensation, benefits, and payroll, employee and management relations, and then policy design, enforcement, and compliance. And we'll start on the first one, which is job analysis. So when you have a need, if you decide that you need to add a job to your workforce, if you need to create a new position, the first step of that process is called job analysis. And this process is done to distinguish one job from another and to aid in setting compensation rates and reporting structures. So it's the process of determining what duties and responsibilities the position will have, and it includes things like the skill set needed, the education required, the work environment, physical aspects of the job, language skills, etc. And usually when we do a job analysis, it's carried out by collecting data, and we do that in a number of ways. We can either have a conversation with the manager that's going to be hiring for the position. We could do a questionnaire, a survey, interview people, make observations, those kinds of things. And then once we have done that sort of basic data collection, we then send that information to set a compensation rate and a reporting structure. And then the result that comes out of that is a comprehensive job description. And I'm sure you're all familiar with what a job description is. The main thing about a job description that you should know is that it's a legal document. And it's the most important and the most useful tool for managing employees in an organization, as well as protecting the organization in the case of legal claims. So it's important for people when they're hired to have the job description reviewed with them, have them sign it, that they understand and acknowledge what's expected of them, as well as understanding all of the physical aspects of the job, et cetera, and an understanding between the two parties that this is what they're being hired to do. So a job description should be written in a professional manner and explain in detail the roles, duties, and responsibilities and the requirements of the position. And so I listed out kind of the things that need to be included in a job description. So obviously the job title, the position structure, the reporting structure, the duties, possibly a statement about the culture or the purpose of the position, the required qualifications, education, and as well as the physical requirements, what soft skills might be needed, such as computer skills or written or verbal skills, the location where the position is located, any travel requirements that you might have, and lastly, their exemption status. So whether the position is hourly or salaried. And you should always include a disclaimer in a job description that the duties and responsibilities that are described in the job description are not a comprehensive list. That additional tasks may be assigned, or that the scope of the position may change as necessitated by business demand. And then once you write a job description, that's not the end of it. You probably should conduct periodic reviews and updates of the job descriptions from time to time to be sure they're accurately reflecting the duties that the person's performing in the position. If the duties change, the person in the position is probably the best person to tell you whether or not their job description continues to accurately reflect their duties. If they have other duties that they're performing, one of the places you would first go for that information is to the person who's actually doing the job. And then we try to make job descriptions enticing to people when they're coming into an organization. So, I do like to have a little bit about the culture listed in there, or even the history of, in this case, the Sisters of Mercy, to make them a little more enthusiastic about the prospect of working there. I have a sample job description that I just worked on for somebody recently that I thought I would share, that contains all of these elements that we're talking about. So this is a job description that I did for the Conference for Mercy Higher Education. They are currently hiring an associate director for mission. So you can see here that the job title is listed at the top. The exempt status is right there. It's exempt, meaning it's salaried.
And excuse me, we can't see the job description. We're still seeing your, but that's okay. You can just talk through it. And then
that's a shame. I wonder why.
I think it's because it's a different share. You would have to unshare your PowerPoint and then reshare the job link. So you can just talk through it. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, let me see. All right. Share. Here. Let's see if that works. Can you see it now?
We can, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. All right. I just have to remember to go back to my presentation then.
Yes.
Okay, again, this is the job description. It's for the Associate Director for Mission. So the job title is listed at the top. The Fair Labor Standard Act status exempt is listed here. That means it's a salaried position. It says what department it's in and that it reports to the Executive Director. And then they do list right here the mission of the Conference for Mercy Higher Education. So it talks a little bit, like that little thing about culture is put in there that I think is really important to include in a job description. The job purpose is pretty comprehensively listed here, as well as all of the essential duties and responsibilities. And you can see down here at the bottom, she indicated that other duties might be assigned by the Executive Director. It's always important to put that sentence in there so that people don't say, well, that's not listed on my job description.
Mm-hmm.
Qualifications. So it's education, competencies, and experience that can all be listed in here. And also the soft skills are put in here, that effective written and oral communication skills are needed, as well as strong technological skills. And then as far as the work environment goes, the travel, requirement is clearly listed here, as well as a statement about, sometimes after hours or weekend work is required. Physical demands, you should always include this because it's for Americans with disabilities. It's kind of a compliance thing that you want to make sure you're adhering to, that you let people know kind of what minimally is going to be required of them from a physical standpoint. So this says the employee may be required to occasionally, stand, walk, sit, speak, hear, use hands to handle objects, bend, stoop, twist, or lift and carry up to 20 pounds. And why do we put all that in there? Because you might have somebody with a disability who might say, I can do all the specifications of this job, but I have a hearing problem, so I'm going to need an accommodation to be able to do the hearing part of this job. So, and then it talks about, being able to use office equipment, computers, telephones, fax machines, read and interpret documents. And the work environment, you want to say whether it's an office environment. I guess in your situation, it would be a school or classroom environment. It could be you're going to work outdoors or something like that. You want to make sure people understand where it is they're going to be performing these duties. And then finally, as I said, you want to make sure that you have an understanding between the two parties of, what, and an agreement that, yes, this is how I understand that this job is going to be performed and I agree with it. And so then there's a place for signatures. And as I mentioned before, you should always have this on here, which is I can perform the functions without accommodations, or I require the following accommodations to do the required functions. And if that's, I'm in a wheelchair, or I have a hearing problem or something like that, it's good to understand that, at the beginning and be able to make those accommodations. We could get more into accommodations for disabilities. You don't always have to accommodate every disability that people have. If it's an undue hardship, you don't have to do that. But if it's a simple accommodation and somebody asks for, I need an ergonomic chair because I have a back problem, like that kind of thing, you would want to accommodate. All right, so I'm going to go back to my presentation. And I have to go back and do it over again. I apologize for that. Sorry, here it is.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
Are there any questions on the job analysis or job design section? Because I'm going to move into recruitment next. And if you do have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
And will I be able to share that example of the job description with the people on this presentation?
Yes, I will
Thank
send
you.
that to you when I think you have the presentation, but
I do.
Send you that copy as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have one question. Sorry, I came in late. So was that the job description? So anybody applying, you have them check that box, or is that only once an offer is made? That was the description?
That would be, well, it could happen usually it comes that whether someone needs an accommodation comes out earlier than on the job description. It usually comes out in the application process. On our job applications, it does ask if they need accommodation. So we would probably know that before we gave somebody the job description. But so I guess to answer your question, this would be after someone has accepted the job and we are having them review and sign the job description. We would probably already know that they need an accommodation, but we would want them to list it on there.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the next stage or the next functional area of HR is recruitment and selection. So when you're searching for the right candidate to fill a role, how and where you advertise the role can make a big difference in who you attract to a position. And some of the channels that I use, that I guess are used by HR frequently are listed here. The first one I listed is an internal search. And I like to do an internal search before I put a posting out on the internet or out into the open world. in case there is someone who is qualified and interested in a role that we're trying to fill. This is just, kind of me and sort of the way we do things, is to look internally first. It's a good strategy to do it, especially if you have a strong career development program, or you just want to offer opportunities to people that you have currently employed. And so if you don't have that, or if you want to do an internal search sort of at the same time that you're doing an external search, the next thing I would do is posting the job out, in a number of different areas. So we use job boards. I think most people use job boards. We at Sisters of Mercy tend to use Indeed and LinkedIn most frequently. Sometimes we use others. Sometimes I was letting Susan know that out on the West Coast, they don't really use Indeed. What they use is Craigslist, and it's kind of strange, but Craigslist is where people in California go to look for jobs. So that's where we post out there. Sometimes we use other job boards like Glassdoor or Monster. It just depends on how wide we're casting the net. And there are times when if we cannot find someone, and it's sort of a more niche type job, that I've actually posted in church bulletins, church flyers. We'll put postings up in supermarkets sometimes. It really depends on how creative you need to get in order to find what you're looking for. And I do know that right now is a very challenging time to find people. It's been very challenging since the latter part of the pandemic. I happen to, in my world at Sisters of Mercy, we kind of manage two different types of employees. One is the healthcare sector, and the other is mainly administrative. Healthcare recruiting over the past 2 years has been extremely difficult, and it continues to be challenging, although it's gotten better. But we have had to be very creative with our searches for people. The one downside of kind of posting on these types of job boards is that sometimes you get a lot of people applying, and it's people that are going on and just click, apply to every job. So you'll end up digging yourself out of a bunch of resumes, people that may not really be interested in the job. So that's sort of, one downside of doing external job boards. Did somebody have a comment? Okay. Another thing that we have done from time to time is a job fair. And this is a recruitment strategy that can be done, alone, like a standalone, or it could be done as a multi-employer job fair. You might rent out a space with other schools or other businesses, and you hold a job fair and people come and you kind of do interviews on the spot. You share with them a little bit about the school or the business that you have, and you give out information. It's a kind of sharing of information. We did a couple job fairs at our healthcare facilities. I think sometimes people like to see where they're going to be working. So when you have a job fair in the location where the job is located, that can be beneficial in finding people. And then through the pandemic, we've actually had to do online job fairs. When we couldn't bring people into facilities, we would have to do these things online, which was challenging. But that is one thing that sort of came out of the pandemic. And then when you have a hard to fill position, we generally turn to a search firm to help us fill that role. It can be expensive. Search firms typically cost the fee that's involved is typically about 20 to 25% of the position's base salary is what they charge you to do a retained search. But they can be very useful in certain situations, especially if it's a niche type position. Susan and I were talking before the session about doing diversity searches and how difficult that can be. And I have found that when you do need that kind of attention to a position, it does help to hire a search firm to assist you, because they're going to do all the work to find somebody. And yes, you do end up paying for it, but it can really be worth it in the end. The other thing is a staffing agency, which is similar, but staffing agencies tend to employ more hourly people. It's good for clerical or for service related jobs. They usually charge you a increased hourly rate for the person. But these types of agencies are really great to use if you have a position that is a permanent position, but you want to try somebody out. So it's like a temp to perm kind of situation. I like to use staffing agencies in that way to bring temp to perm employees on board, and they get a taste of the culture. They get to, experience the people they're going to be working with. You get to try them out, and it ends up kind of being a win-win for everybody. And then finally, with recruitment, employee referrals. We tend to rely on these heavily in our healthcare settings, and we've actually recently started to do an employee referral bonus. This was, again, through the pandemic, trying to find people, which was difficult. Employee referrals, we relied heavily on those. And, the bonus we give is if somebody stays for 90 days, they get a portion of the bonus. And if they're still there at 6 months, they get the rest of it. And that has worked for us pretty well. So the next part of this is selection, the selection process. And I think the selection process is probably, similar across different organizations. But you start with an application, and then you review those applications. The application could also just be a resume. You conduct screenings and whatever assessments that you feel you need to do. And then comes the interview process. It can be a simple interview process, or it can be multiple stages. I think most places tend to do an initial interview and then a follow-up or a second interview with a different group of people. And then finally, once you've made an offer to someone, then you go into the background check or drug screen, reference checking part of the process. And then finally, you place the candidate in the position. I do want to stress that you don't want to do, or it's not legal to do background checks on people unless you have made a verbal offer of employment to them. So I just have some best practices listed here for the selection process. You make sure that when you put your process in place, that you use a systematic and impartial hiring process so that every candidate is assessed equally, and that there's no, sort of bias involved in that process. Your interview questions should center around the work that's listed on your job description. It can include things like work samples, competency-based questions, or behavior-based questions. Those are like, tell me about a time when you had a conflict with somebody and you resolved it, that kind of a question. Because you want to, you know, the goal is to draw out a candidate's overall qualifications. Make sure that you stay away from personal questions in interviews, especially questions that are not legal, obviously. And these, you know, vary from state to state, but, you know, I just listed some of them here: national origin, race, age, marital status, and family status. So you don't want to go into an interview saying, oh, do you have kids? You know, that's not a question that you should be asking, because that's not relevant to the position somebody's going to be performing. If you used things like tests and assessments, make sure they are relevant to the job requirements. So you don't want to have somebody who's, I don't know, in a clerical position. You don't want them to have to take an accounting test or something like that. Just make sure that whatever assessments that you're giving are you can tie back to the job description. And then people who are involved in your hiring process, which would obviously be the manager of the position, but there may be others. Make sure that whoever is involved has the right skills to do interviews and understands how to do interviews, and that they won't be judging someone based on things like likability or a stereotype or just their first impression. Background checks and reference checks are important tools. But again, the background check process has to be relevant to the position. So just by example, if you're hiring a nurse, for example, you're not going to do a motor vehicle check on that person, because whether or not that person has a suspended driver's license has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they're a good nurse. And it does, if they have to find a way to work that's not driving, that is their responsibility, and that's not something that we should be considering as part of the interview process or hiring process. If you do background checks, it's important that you have them sign a consent form so that they know what is being asked of them. And there are certain documents that you need to provide to them from the Fair Credit Reporting Act, so they understand where you're going to get the information from. I'm also going to say that don't do credit checks on people unless they are handling money. You don't need to do a credit check on a nurse or a CNA or probably a teacher. It's not relevant to the job. So any questions on any of the recruitment and selection stuff that we went over?
I have a couple questions. One is, are you finding that reference checks that people are only given name, rank, and serial number anymore? I mean, it used to be that you could really get a good background on how they were as an employee. Now, yeah. I came from the mental health nonprofit world, and it was getting more and more that all you get was name, rank, and serial number. The second question I have is, for drug screenings, do you include marijuana in that, or do you recommend that? Or because a lot of places seem to be taking marijuana out of drug testing.
Yeah, so to your first question, I can tell you that the Sisters of Mercy, when somebody calls us and asks us to provide information about a previous employee, the only information that we give out is dates of employment, job title, whether or not they're eligible for rehire. Those are the things that we answer. And I understand what you're saying about references, and it can be frustrating. But what we do when we have someone fill out an application is ask them to provide us with names of people who are not former employers. So a character reference or a professional reference. So it might have been a colleague or a supervisor in a previous role, or maybe a professor they had or something like that, that will actually give us information rather than just, calling the HR department and having them verify your employment, because verifying employment is different than giving a reference. To your other question about the drug screening, we eliminated marijuana from the drug testing process for our whole organization. And that's because marijuana is legal in so many states at this point, whether it's medical or recreational, that it doesn't make sense. It's like alcohol, like we don't include that in our drug screen either. But, there are other ways to monitor for that kind of behavior in the workplace. And if somebody is legally using marijuana, they have a doctor's note or something like that, it's not an area where we can discriminate against them. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to move on to training and development. This is the next section of HR function, the training of new and existing employees. So the aim is to increase knowledge, skills, ability, awareness, and aptitude of employees in performing their jobs, and understanding their work environment and the culture that they work in. So it includes the things that I listed below, which are orientation, onboarding, job training, compliance training, and career development. So I want to make a distinction between orientation and onboarding, because sometimes people use those terms sort of interchangeably, and there is a difference between orientation and onboarding. Orientation is really, it's kind of like an event that happens, and whether it's a day or 2 days or 3, it's your formal introduction to, of a new hire to the place of employment. And the onboarding, well, it gets people kind of immediately familiar with the culture and the mission of the organization. But orientation and onboarding are different in that onboarding is a process, a longer process of integrating an employee into an organization and helping that person to become comfortable in the new environment and understand their role. So it's an important distinction to make when people are using those terms. Job training is anything from, skill training to training on procedures and processes that they might be using in their job or in their department, and, kind of the way the things work in that department. And then compliance training is anything from, maybe training on the employee handbook, some of the things they need to know around legal compliance, safety training, things of that nature, if they are involved at all in anything to do with employees' health or wellness or anything. HIPAA training is something, maybe if they're in accounting, they need training on securities compliance. And then career development programs are sort of more formalized programs where you have maybe certain modules that people are required to complete in order to make it to the point where they can be promoted to a next level position. And that can include also, in career development, can also include things like coaching and mentoring and leadership development programs. So new hire orientation, just to focus on it quickly. Like I said, it's more of an event related thing than an ongoing thing. So what you want to do is kind of in that short span of time that you're orienting somebody, these are some kind of important tips You want to make sure that the employee is understanding and engaging with the organization and its mission. So you might do something like, I mean, I'll tell you what we do is, you know, we have people watch a video on Catherine McCauley. We have people sit with some sisters and talk about, you know, the mission of the organization. We teach them about the critical concerns of the sisters. And then we also have them, depending on their role, we can have them meet with directors of certain departments, like our anti-racism and racial equity director, the director of the justice team, the director of our climate and sustainability initiative. Learning the organization's values is very important. We have our values listed in the handbook that everyone gets, and we post the values in various places around our building. We have activities that go on around the values. So learning them in the very first days of employment is important. And then, you know, as part of the onboarding process, you know, we expand that and continue to reinforce the values. You know, make sure you review the handbook with them, all the policies and standards of conduct and things like that. You want to set people up for success, so you want to make sure they understand what the rules are in the work environment, and then review their job description with them and make sure they understand the expectations of their position. And then finally, and this is important too, is, you know, to kind of make it personal. When somebody is new, they feel sort of, you know, awkward at first. So it's important to introduce them to other people, maybe have an activity, or, you know, take them to lunch or have a coffee with other employees to introduce them during their, you know, first few days of employment. And then I have just some best practices listed here for training. The first one, and this, we'll revisit this in the performance management section, but job performance starts on the first day of employment. So you want to make sure you give your new employees the tools and training they need starting on day one. You want to set them up for success. You should incorporate different types of training to accommodate different learning styles. I know I'm speaking to the choir here because you're all in education. But, you know, some people are visual learners, some people, you know, are auditory, and some like to do hands-on type things. So incorporate all three in the training that you do with people. Use assessments to gauge learning. So if you have a complex process or a procedure or something that you have to have somebody learn, you know, maybe use some type of assessment to see if they are in fact learning how to do it. That's the best way to do it. Ask for feedback on the training process from the person who's going through it to see if they feel it's effective. Maybe they have suggestions, and you should refine the process as often as you need to based on that feedback that you get. As far as compliance goes, there are certain states that require us to train people on certain things. And I'll just specifically state, in the state of California, managers in that state are required to be trained on sexual harassment prevention once every 2 years. And it's whether you have, I think it starts, you know, at 1 employee. You have to do the training. It's required by law, and you have to keep track of who's got the training, and you have to retrain them, you know, every 2 years. So you should understand if your state that you are working in has compliance laws, and make sure that you train and retrain employees as required. Working on job goals and objectives together with the employee where possible, so that you can make a development plan for that person will make that person feel more comfortable in their role and they understand what they're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you know, they might be out there saying, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I think having those concrete things in place is very helpful. Any questions on training and development? I'm going to move to performance management next. Performance management is just a huge area of HR. It's something that is, you know, it encompasses a lot of things. But I've outlined here kind of what I think the main points of performance management are. It's a process that starts on the first day of employment, as I mentioned before, and it follows the employee through the life cycle of their employment in an organization. And it includes things like setting performance expectations, having performance discussions, determining performance issues, and then documenting any performance problems that they might have. So, you know, the process of performance management is a process of creating and maintaining a productive and efficient work environment. And it's an ongoing practice that can significantly impact productivity in the workplace because it's focused on accountability and transparency of expectations. It can include the following actions: employee coaching and feedback, the administration of performance appraisals, managing job performance in line with policies. So that would be maybe standards of conduct, people's behavior, that kind of thing. And then addressing job performance problems in a timely way. So you want to make sure if there is a problem that you're not pushing it off and saying, well, maybe it'll get better. You really need to hit it head on and, you know, address them as they occur. You can't go back and to someone and say, well, last year I saw you did this, you know, or 3 months ago you did that. That's not going to fly if you end up in a court of law with somebody that you didn't address their performance problems timely. Okay, so for leaders in an organization, best practices for performance management are start with, you know, hiring the right person. This goes all the way back to things we already went over. These are sort of the building blocks of performance management, and the thing is to start with the best person for the job. Understand that before you hire somebody, you know, kind of assess how they're going to do within the organization's culture, make sure they meet all the qualifications, and then provide great training to them, from orientation to on-the-job training, to set them up for success. Maybe provide them with a mentor, answer any questions they have, be available, give feedback, and then focus on communication. You want to check in frequently with people, especially when they're new hires during their onboarding process. You want to set clear, concise, and measurable goals and objectives with the employee, offer your support, and again, you know, give feedback. If you have to have a performance conversation with somebody, you know, maybe you're noticing something before it mushrooms into a bigger problem, you know, start with having a performance conversation with the person. You want to identify with them what the main issue is. Maybe there's more than one, but you want to focus on the main issue and define the area to concentrate on. Choose that one area that's going to bring the most needed improvement. Craft your message. So you want to create a statement that describes the area the employee needs to develop. You want to frame it in a positive way, and also suggest that you will provide coaching and assistance to them. When you're having the discussion with the employee, you know, make sure to demonstrate your support for areas of development while making it clear that the employee is ultimately responsible for reaching the necessary objectives. Confirm with the employee their understanding of the issues and their willingness to take responsibility for their area of development. And then after the discussion, you'll want to follow up with an employee by providing them with what I call SMART goals. This is probably something you're already aware of too, as teachers and educators, that are designed to help the employee reach their performance objective. And then you'll want to reinforce any progress they've made and continue to provide feedback. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time focused. And I just included an example here. So this is not related to job performance, but it just kind of shows you the process for making a SMART goal. This person said, I want to publish more blog posts on my website. So the SMART goal components, being specific, I will publish 4 1,500-word blog posts next month. Measurable, I will have 52 blog posts by the end of the year. Achievable, I've already started a blog. I will shift my focus to writing 1,500 words on my blog. Relevant, I've always wanted to increase traffic to my blog. This will allow me to build my brand and maybe make money. And then time bound, how long is it going to take to reach the goal? I'll start next week. By the end of the year, I'll have 52 blog posts. So then when you're writing out the goal, it's starting next week. I will post a 1,500-word article on my blog each week for a year, culminating in 52 blog posts and increase traffic to my website. So that's just an example, but giving people, these specific kind of components when having them have a goal or objective in mind is really helpful, because they know exactly what they need to do and in exactly what amount of time you're expecting them to do it. So I'll go back. Any questions on performance management? I'm trying to see how we're doing on time. Are we okay, Susan?
Yes, we have about a half hour more.
Okay, great. Any questions on performance management from anybody? Okay, I'm going to move on to, I don't have a lot for this section, but I will talk about compensation, benefits, and payroll. So compensation obviously is the payment that you make to an employee for the services they provide to an organization. Compensation is a combination of things like their salary, variable compensation elements, and then and employee benefits. So you should have a compensation strategy that's aligned with your mission and vision, and is also fair and attractive to potential employees. So there's, like I said, there's a couple components. The fixed component of compensation is obviously their wages, their pay. And then there's variable components that can also go along with that, like bonuses or discretionary contributions to maybe their retirement plan or their health benefit plans. And then, benefits obviously being another huge part of an overall compensation package to employees, and it complements their wages. And then just talking a little bit about the function of payroll. In the Sisters of Mercy organization, payroll is housed in HR. In some organizations, payroll is actually housed in finance, or sometimes it's even completely outsourced to a vendor like ADP or somebody. So it's kind of how you approach the compensation strategy is different from how you administer payroll. But when they're all put together, they're all sort of one area of HR. So the next section or function of HR is employee and management relations. So employee relations focuses on employee concerns and really can focus on any one of the areas of HR that we've talked about today. Anything from, employee recognition and rewards, identifying issues in the workplace, investigating complaints, maybe somebody mentioned hostile work environment complaint, and then ensuring compliance with employment laws and regulations, administering employee surveys, engagement surveys, and those kinds of things. And one of the places that you start with employee relations is your employee manual and your employee handbook. Handbooks are very, very important to have, and because they are really a roadmap for employees to find answers to so many questions about an organization and how it's run. So I would encourage everybody to make sure that they have a good, solid employee handbook. And management relations can include things like consultations on policies, policy development, performance management consultations, and guidance to supervisors on how to conduct performance appraisals. If you have to have a performance discussion with somebody, those are some of the things that managers come to HR to get help with. Some organizations have unions. We don't have them, but in some organizations they exist, and in those organizations, labor relations is a separate function and can be involved in things like negotiating union contracts or collective bargaining agreements, handling grievances, and arbitration. We don't have that, but I know it's a big part of some organizations and the way their HR department is run. So best practices, I already talked about the employee handbook and employee manual being very important. Make sure that you're very consistent with applying your policies to your employee population. You don't want to have one department, enforcing great attendance, and looking at everybody's absences, and then in another department, it's completely not a thing. If you have an attendance policy or something of that nature, you need to administer it equally and fairly and equitably across your organization. Make sure that if you use performance appraisals, that you are doing so consistently. Don't go 3 years between appraisals and, give 2 years in a row and then wait 3 years to give another one. If you're going to do performance appraisals, you need to do them at regular intervals and at intervals that your employees expect and understand to be the case. You want to make sure that you're transparent and clear on how your salary increase process works. In my organization, the Sisters of Mercy, we do an annual discretionary salary increase. We basically take some market data, economic data, things of that nature to our leadership team, and we provide them with information that helps them make a decision about how much of a salary increase people are going to get, and whether it's going to be universally applied or applied to certain areas and not others. Your employees should understand that if you do merit increases, same thing. What is the merit increase based on? Is it based on a score on their performance appraisal? Make sure that they know exactly what that is. There shouldn't be any guessing that goes on. If somebody is in your organization and they want to be promoted, they should know what the path is for them to get a promotion. It should be clear. It should definitely not be based on who likes who better than, you know, somebody else. It should be based on very clear and attainable guidelines. You should have a documented disciplinary action process. I just wrote a disciplinary action process for SMA, Sisters of Mercy, that outlines specifically what the steps are in our disciplinary process. It starts with the counseling, it goes to a verbal warning, it goes to a written warning, a final warning, suspension, termination. Make sure you have that documented, written out, make sure your managers understand it. You don't have to give that out to employees, but your managers in the organization should understand how your disciplinary process works, and it should be applied evenly and equitably across your organization. And then, you know, make sure that people in your organization understand who to contact for the different types of HR issues that there are. If it's benefits, maybe you have somebody that handles benefits. If you have, you know, someone who handles payroll separately, just give your employees the different contact people that they will need to reach out to if they have a question about, you know, something related to HR. Questions on that at all? Okay, and this is the last one, compliance. You know, in any organization, HR is tasked with ensuring that organizational policies and procedures are compliant with federal, state, and local laws. And those laws change all the time, you know, constantly. And in multiple states, you're frequently. We just handed out our handbook July of 2021, and now we're having to redo the handbook again because the laws in various states have all changed. So it has to be updated, you know, constantly, and then you have to make sure that if there are things that you have to do to be compliant, like reports that you have to file, that you're doing so in line with whatever laws are in place. And then we are tasked with filing compliance reports, like our EEO1 report, Equal Employment Opportunity. Any organization that has more than 100 employees has to file an EEO1 that shows the government what positions you have and what race and nationality the employee and sex the employees are that are filling those roles. The ACA paperwork, that's for the Obamacare. There's different reports that have to be filed with the government about that. And then, you know, compliance training. We are in HR, we're tasked with compliance training, things in the handbook, harassment prevention, for example, and we do those at regular intervals. Every state that you operate in, every facility that you operate should have a labor law poster posted in it in the break room or lunchroom or somewhere where employees can readily see it. And we, you know, these labor law posters are updated sometimes multiple times a year. We subscribe to a labor law compliant organization, and they send our labor law posters. I have 37 locations that I'm having labor law posters go to, but I'm very confident that we have the most up-to-date poster in every organization that we have. Make sure, again, your pay and compensation practices are legal and compliant. And then that you're making workplace accommodations for people who need them and ask for them, as long as it's not an undue hardship. Leave of absence policies like FMLA. You know, there are certain very specific guidelines that employees have to reach to be eligible for certain leave programs like the FMLA. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're being compliant and offering those to people who are eligible for them. If you are regulated by OSHA, that you have the safety laws and regulations in place that you need to. You're filing your OSHA 300 logs or reports, those types of things. And then occasionally, probably periodically, there are audits that happen. Usually the audits in our organization are done in the finance department, but a lot of times they ask us for information from HR in order to complete the audit. So compliance, again, in and of itself is a huge area of HR. There's a lot, you know, there's a lot to HR. So I think I kind of hopefully imparted that to you guys today. Just to talk real quickly about organizational culture. There's this picture here on the left-hand side. That's myself right there. And this is a anti-racism committee that we had with the sisters, some sisters in there. But to me, that was a good picture that shows our organizational culture. The organizational culture in Mercy is an ideological culture. So it's a culture that's tied to certain values, beliefs, and ideals that are fundamental, and that has, you know, guidelines that govern people's decisions and interactions. It's, you know, I feel like the Mercy culture is very front and center, and I think it's I'm sure it's that way in your schools as well. So what is organizational culture? It's the system of beliefs that govern behavior, and it may be manifested in the following elements. So leadership behaviors. Leaders are responsible for creating systems that reinforce workplace norms. Cultural norms are adopted by others from the actions of a leader, such as how they react to a crisis or what behaviors they model to others. Communication style. Effective communication keeps internal processes running smoothly and helps create positive relations with those in the organization. Internal messaging. So communicating and reinforcing the mission and values of the organization frequently will ensure that employees are in tune with the culture. It's important to do this as part of the hiring process, as we talked before, but then it's also important to continue to reinforce the mission and values and of the organization throughout, you know, the life cycle of employees. And then this is very interesting. The types of celebrations that an organization uses, the sort of rituals and celebrations are, you know, show what values that it embodies. So in our organization, you know, we celebrate, it's the heroes of our organization. So Catherine McCauley, maybe Frances Ward, maybe there's certain sisters that we celebrate certain times of the year. We celebrate certain things that are important to Mercy. These types of celebrations strengthen connections with employees. And then we highlight, you know, things that are symbolic in our organization, like our Mercy logo. The factors, the things that shape organizational culture. I know I've talked about values throughout this whole presentation, but it's really very important that, you know, the defined values of an organization are really the most important component of its culture. The channels of authority in an organization do shape its culture. So does an organization value traditional degrees of hierarchy, or you know, something very defined, or is it sort of more loosely defined, and, you know, maybe people accept challenges of traditional authority and allow people to work outside of formal hierarchical structures. And then whether an organization is oriented to people or to tasks is also something that shapes culture. Do they put people first when making decisions and believe that people drive the performance of the organization? You will find, people-centered orientation in service industries and creative industries. Or do they put tasks and processes first, and in doing so believe that quality and efficiency drive the performance of an organization? And you might find that that's the case in organizations that are sort of more geared toward research and development, manufacturing, maybe the things that are time sensitive, like the transportation industry is very reliant on quality and efficiency. And then just to talk real quickly about how do I work on infusing Mercy culture into practice in the organization. I start with the hiring process. We conduct values interviews or cultural fit interviews, questions that we ask around, screening for cultural fit. We speak a lot about the values, the mission, and the history of the organization in talking to potential employees. In our onboarding program, we teach and reinforce new employees, again, the vision, values, and critical concerns of the sisters, introduce them to the history, the founders. We infuse the values into behavioral norms and desired behaviors. We have a rewards and recognition program that spotlights employees who embody Mercy and reward the demonstration of Mercy values. And then finally, in our performance feedback process, we do include Mercy values as a critical element of job performance when we're doing performance appraisals. So any questions on any of the organizational culture aspects? I'll just hit on real quick. I know we're getting towards the end here. So just want to talk a little bit about HR trends. These are things that are sort of currently happening or will be happening soon, coming to a place near you. First one is salary and pay equity and transparency. In the state of California and the state of New York this year in January, they put into place laws that you must be completely transparent about your pay scales. In every job posting that you put, you have to list a pay scale. And if someone, an employee, comes to you and asks you for their pay scale, you have to give it to them. This is just the first 2 states to do this. I have been told by lots of legal people that this is something that will happen across the United States, in the few years to come, that this will become a norm, that everybody will be required to post their salary ranges and things like that. So just be aware that that's going to happen. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. A lot of places already have these initiatives in place. We certainly, we have a whole department on anti-racism and racial equity, but I think, and I know I've seen that MESA has done a lot of this work as well, but there will be, continued focus on these types of programs going forward, and they'll be refined and probably expanded. The next one is remote work and telecommuting. I know that in schools that this is not a thing really, but in the world at large, the remote work and telecommuting is huge, and it has taken over, especially as a result of the pandemic. We offer a hybrid work model with the Sisters of Mercy. This type of thing seems to have become the norm. We do feel that it allows employees to kind of enjoy the freedom of remote work while also, having them be in the office and use their office time to its maximum potential. I don't think that hybrid work or remote work is ever going to go away. I think that it will continue to be there and possibly expand in the future. So gig or freelance work, you may have heard the term gig economy. This is people who are doing things like, you've probably seen DoorDash or Instacart or Uber drivers, or any of those things. People are using these to supplement their income. Sometimes that is their job. It depends on how much they want to do it. And then companies or organizations are also utilizing what they call short-term hires for what could be an interim position to meet a certain need or bring a unique skill set in for a short-term assignment. So that is something that is a trend that is happening now. I don't know if you've ever heard the term boomerang, and it's kind of new to me, but boomerangs are the baby boomer generation who is re-entering the workforce. And whether they're doing so out of necessity or because the labor market needs them, baby boomers who may have retired are coming back into the workforce, maybe into different types of jobs. And maybe it's because the economy is requiring them to do so because, maybe they lost some of their nest egg or some such thing. But it's an interesting trend to see that, people who have retired are re-entering the workforce. And then finally, workforce balance or work-life balance, is a term that we're probably all familiar with, but the new term is work-life integration, and it revolves around flexibility. So it means more flexibility in work hours and sort of like no clock watching, and allowing people to take midday breaks or complete their work when it's convenient for them, which could be late at night or early in the morning. So it's, you hear the terms buyer's market, seller's market. It's a buyer's market right now in terms of employees. Potential employees are sort of dictating the way the job market is going right now. And you can see that here in the telecommuting, the remote work, and the work-life integration trends that are happening. So that is all I have, and I hope. HR resources. I did include this, and I think you'll get a copy of this presentation. But just I know from doing when Sister Lisa asked me to go to Oklahoma a couple years ago and do a similar presentation. And so I provided this to the people in that workshop. These are just some resources that you might have. You probably don't have an HR department in some of your schools. So this is just a listing of where you can go to get HR assistance. So HR associations, there's one in every county, I'm pretty sure. And you can go to them for assistance in things like policies or, if there's a compliance issue that you have, I'm sure they're happy to help. Professional employer organizations are out there. They offer things like HR consulting, safety, consulting, payroll processing, tax filing, workers' comp, benefits, you name it, they offer it. And then also HR consulting firms, sometimes they're a little bit more expensive, but you can hire them to do a short-term project like an employee handbook or something like that. You can outsource HR to an HR outsourcing company. There's a lot of those out there as well. Recruitment and staffing, we talked about those agencies that will help you do that. If you want to, you can share an HR employee with another school or another business. to serve several locations and streamline your processes while keeping your costs in line. And then finally, there are online resources out there, such as SHRM, the Society for HR Management, or World at Work, that can provide you with online articles and guidance and toolkits and things like that in any matters relating to HR. So I think we covered a lot in this hour and a half, and I really thank everybody for tuning in and for being here today. And I hope that I shared some knowledge with you that was useful to you. So that's all I have. Susan?
And thank you very much. I just want to open it up for, are there any questions? I know Ann talked a lot about the questions the poll questions that you asked in the beginning, or the chat questions. But are there any questions for Ann before we say goodbye to her and thank her? And I took like 5 pages of notes, and there are so many things that you shared with us, but I really would like to thank you for talking about just the importance of handbooks, the importance of disciplinary action. I know as a principal and a head of school, these are really important pieces, and you don't want to get into legal problems. So you want to be as proactive as one can. Yes. And ideas of where to post jobs. And I loved Joe's question about the references and, kind of figure out a way to not talk to that true supervisor. So thank you very much for all that you shared with us. And I will share the slides with everyone, but your expertise is great. So thank you for sharing with our leaders, our Mercy leaders.
Thank you. And I'll also share my contact information. I am available to anybody in Mesa who wants to reach out to me about, a concern or a question or anything else.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.